and welcome to Abstract, a show dedicated to abstract ideas discussed amidst ever-changing tunes. I'm your host, Abbey B.K, and outside today it is unfortunately kind of dreary and sad, but hopefully we'll see sunny skies soon. And with me today on the show, we have Brittany. How are you doing?
Hi, Abby. I am great this morning despite the weather.
I know. I was so bummed because it's only like 55 degrees, not to be the lamos that are talking about the weather when we have so much to talk about. But so, I mean, we were in great conversation before we started to go on the airwaves, but we met initially at a networking event.
Yeah.
And we've both been kind of doing our networking business here in town. So
I feel like I've seen you so much in the past 2 months.
I know. But it's nice to see familiar faces now, because that first event that I went to, I mean, thankfully I arrived with my friends, so I had one familiar face, but I didn't know anyone. So it's nice to see that building. So what's the importance of networking to you? And I feel like you're all over town, so give us your spiel.
Yeah, so networking is so important, especially being in the state of Vermont. We are, in retrospect, a pretty small state, but it's really to deepen relationships with people. You know, you never know who you're talking to until you get to know them, and their story could offer some inspiration. It could offer some education to you. They could always teach you something, give you advice. So networking to me, especially as an entrepreneur, it is crucial. It is a pivotal piece as to the growth of your business, the growth of you as a business owner, and just as a human in general.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I've loved meeting people. One of my biggest goals was to just put myself out there a little bit more and talk to people, which can be intimidating.
Oh, so intimidating.
Yeah, but I feel like you've been great at it.
Thank you.
The one event that we were at, I was pulled up to do my little introduction, and I was so impressed by you because you just went up there and introduced yourself. So how did you find the confidence to be comfortable in yourself enough to feel confident in pitching yourself in your business?
Yeah. You know, I didn't always have this. I tend to call myself an extroverted introvert, where once my social battery runs out, I just want to be left alone and curl up under a heated blanket. But it really does take practice, I would say. The biggest piece that the biggest exercise that I practiced when I first started the business was public speaking. So immediately I joined a networking group that forced me to get up in front of a room of 40 people every single week to pitch myself. The first one I did, awful. I forgot half my speech. I forgot to introduce my name.
It happens.
It does, exactly. And it's that practice every single week. Also, joining the comedy world really helps, because even when you practice a set or a pitch for yourself, things aren't always going to go the way you expect. You know, noises happen, you lose your train of thought, you can't always control your external environment, but the way you adapt to it, that's where improv comes into play. So being able to, incorporate some of those skills into your pitching ability also helps you really showcase your personality, which I feel that's what people are most attracted to. Not just your services, not just your products as an entrepreneur, but they're hiring you for your personality, and they want to get to know you and deepen your relationship with them. So I feel like that's a big part of it, is, not being afraid to sprinkle in little aspects of yourself. And I'm a weirdo. I, self-described millennial weirdo. So I am not afraid to show that anymore. And I joke with people that I really don't have shame anymore, because, sometimes you just have to go for it. And when I did start to go for it, and, one of the things that I do besides comedy is burlesque. And I was always afraid to, mention that, because you don't know if people will still see you as a professional. They won't take you as seriously. There are all these doubts surrounding it. But when I started, sprinkling that into my conversations with people and heard the positive feedback from people, that's so awesome. I wish, let me know when the next show is. I wish I had that bravery. I was like, wow, okay, people like this.
Yeah.
Let me just start shouting it from the rooftops and incorporating, comedy more into the business. So I feel like that's really helpful. And for people that are listening out there is, practice and don't try to hide pieces of yourself.
No, be yourself.
Yeah, it's not going to come off as authentic.
Yeah, no, I totally relate to that. I mean, like as a musician and singer-songwriter, sometimes I don't know like when to put that in to like my pitch or like where that falls in. Yeah. And also, you don't want to feel like you're bragging about the things that you do. Yeah. So it's kind of hard to find the balance. But I mean, one thing that I've kind of found, and maybe you can relate, is sometimes I'll treat like pitching myself or like whatever more as like a performance. Yeah. So I'm imagining kind of like with comedy and improv, obviously like when you're in that setting, you can go up and be on stage and you're performing. Yeah. I think sometimes when you like detach yourself from like who you kind of actually are, still being authentic, but you make it more into that, sometimes that's helpful. Do you find that that's true for you?
I feel like that's true in places where people need a little bit more lightheartedness. Yeah. So when I, the mood has kind of, gotten a little monotonous, I'm like, okay, how can I brighten up this crowd a little bit? Because, I'm a very bubbly person. So sometimes that could be a little much for people right off. Like sometimes I feel like I'm coming in hot. Yeah. So if I, take the awareness, see what the situation is and then sneak in a joke here or there, lighten up the mood a little bit. That definitely helps in certain networking situations. So that way it doesn't feel as stiff. Like people can actually get to know each other. And some of my best business conversations have come out of conversations that we are finding personal interest commonalities. Yeah. So I also want to say you don't always have to start with pitching yourself. I often come in with a mindset of I genuinely want to get to know the other person, not to sell them anything, but just to get to know them, to get to know Abby. We were talking before we started the show about some of our commonalities, and now we're able to talk about them over the airwaves. So, you don't get to know people unless you ask those more personal questions. Totally. With boundaries, being respectful of people. But, talking about hobbies and interests can sometimes form into the best business conversations down the road. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's the whole reason why I'm sure we both started a podcast because we love talking to people. Exactly. So tell us more about your business, the Winfield Creative in general, and the starts of it and where you're at now and your main mission. Yeah. So here's the pitch. Yes. Here's the pitch. So here's where the practice comes in. And it took me so long to get this pitch down. So the Winfield Creative is a social media management and mentorship business. We also provide other digital marketing services such as email, web design, and paid advertising. But usually people know us from social media and Instagram. So we provide content marketing solutions for women-owned businesses. And my main mission is to help womenpreneurs effectively market their business while still incorporating the education of how do you spend less time on social media. So if we have these systems in place with these concepts of batching and, all the other things, time management and content creation and, incorporating your visual identity, you can effectively market your business in less time than you're probably spending right now. And that's at the heart of what we do. Sweet. Yeah. And how did you kind of find the niche of wanting to work with women particularly? Like, why does that speak to you? Obviously, like, we're both women, so it makes it easy, but is there like a deeper meaning behind that? Yeah. Ever since I was young, I've always had this affinity to helping women. So before we started the podcast, I was mentioning to Abby that I started off at UVM back in the day, over a decade ago. Ooh, scary. As a pre-med major. And what I wanted to end up doing was go into the OBGYN field. So I've always wanted to help women. Yep. And then when I started the business, I thought to myself, what attracts me to marketing? What attracts me to want to become an entrepreneur in the first place? And who needs the most help? Yeah. And I feel like women in Vermont, they are a very underserved population. They need help, especially solopreneurs. So my niche is not just womenpreneurs, but solo women who are their own HR departments, who are the marketing department, who are the boss, who are
so much work.
A lot of them are moms, and so they have to balance that into their everyday business. Running the operations. It's a lot to handle. So if I'm privileged enough to have the time, the knowledge, the drive to take that off of their plate, or to, again, educate them so that way they can take more things off their plate, why wouldn't I do that?
Yeah, I love that. And I love the section between obviously going in and doing something quite different than what you're doing now with the medical, but that makes complete sense why the mission kind of has stayed the same.
Yeah, I always joke that at one point I wanted to help women have their babies and help them raise their babies. Yep. Now I just help them raise their business babies.
Yeah, exactly. Have time for their babies.
Yeah, exactly.
So that their business has it under wraps. I love it. Well, let's play one of your songs that you chose. So obviously on Abstract, we always play your music selections and kind of get to know people through their music choices as well. Yeah. So these were the 5 that you chose to refresh your brain if you want to take a look.
Yes.
Is there one specifically that you'd like to play first, and then take us through why you chose it as one of your 5?
So I think that I would love to play Screen by 21 Pilots.
Okay.
This is a song that means a lot to me. I got to go see 21 Pilots back in the day, I was back in college, drove all the way to the 930 Club in Washington, D.C. to see them. And during this song in particular, it's a song about exposing yourself. So as if you have a TV screen on your chest, and really getting to know people for who they are on the inside, the outside, all of their thoughts and dreams and hopes. And just the I'm literally getting goosebumps right now.
Yes,
the community of... Imagine a packed club, people screaming the song at the top of their lungs, linked arm in arm and swaying. And that's exactly the environment that, the community that was just so vulnerable in that moment without saying a word to each other, except for screaming the lyrics at each other. So that often reminds me of entrepreneurship and showcasing your authenticity online through your branding. So
I love that.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's start with that one.
Well, I do love 21 Pilots, so I was excited you chose this. All right. This is Screen by 21 Pilots. Here we go. And we are back. That was Screen by 21 Pilots. I can totally see the people arm in arm.
Yeah, it was really
together.
A pivotal moment for me. And I honestly think that perfectly explains entrepreneurship. You are exposing yourself oftentimes to something so new.
Yeah.
And even I went through a more formal grad program before starting the business, and still nothing prepared me for some of the stuff that came my way during the first few years of starting the Winfield Creative. And I feel like that's a perfect storytelling of what it's like. You are putting yourself in a very vulnerable position being an entrepreneur.
Definitely.
And the more you could stay true to yourself while being open to ideas, the more you'll grow, and you'll be able to overcome things that you might not have thought were possible before.
Totally. And I love that you are able to kind of draw that from a song, and that's that's my bread and butter. I love talking to people about that. And so one thing you had also mentioned off air is how music does speak to you emotionally, and also how you incorporate that into the Winfield Creative. So talk to us about that a little bit more, and how you use different sounds to convey, I guess, certain messages.
Yeah. So especially this is true with Instagram Reels, but a big piece of creating content is storytelling. It's not just about 10 tips to grow your social media brand. It's who is the person, who's the business owner behind the screen. And oftentimes we look at social media as just that, a media platform, but we forget that it's the first word of social media is social. Right. So looking at it from a platform that could be a way to network with people, just it happens to be over a phone screen. Music comes into play for me when I am thinking about how to incorporate more emotion. So if I'm talking about something that is troubling me, I'm not going to use the newest pop song on
that'd be a bit dystopian.
Just because it's a trending song. So really having an awareness of the music. Also, I'm a huge person into lyrics, as you can imagine.
Same.
Listening to, if you listen to these lyrics especially, you'll have an understanding of like, oh, okay, Britney's feeling a certain type of way, you know, or you might find a song that you like that you can then share with somebody else, and then essentially your feelings, you share some of the same feelings. So I think that's very powerful when we might not have the words ourselves to communicate how we're feeling. Sometimes songs can do it for us. And of course, on the opposite side, having respect for the producers, the lyricists, the musicians that are playing the instruments, you know, they in a sense are just like entrepreneurs putting themselves into a very vulnerable space. So from that aspect too, is like having that respect for the music industry in a way that you know, I can't play instruments. I can sing, but, you know, not at a level that most can. Being able to share music with people is a way that I consider myself a music enthusiast without being a musician, so to speak. Right. And yeah, being able to incorporate that into my social media marketing, it allows me to connect with people in a way that I might not be able to connect with them before.
Right. Yeah. I think everyone has like their own personalized experience with music, and you definitely don't have to create your own to have an emotional connection to sound in any variety, honestly. So kind of just in a broader sense, what are your future goals for the Winfield Creative? You've obviously built like an awesome name for yourself. You're networking all around town. So what are your future goals? What do you foresee being the next kind of steps that you want to take to continue growing? Yeah,
so absolutely bringing on more help with the Winfield Creative. So right now I'm a solopreneur, and there's more work to be done than I can handle. Just as as by myself. So being able to bring a trusted person on as maybe a content specialist, thinking about hiring an intern, that's really the next step, is getting some help. So that way we can make more impact among the world. I will be able to educate more around the community and provide that free education if the management work, you know, some of those pieces are delegated with a trusted person. One of the dreams, the visions I have on my vision board is, you know, maybe doing like an online conference or a summit that pulls people together to provide education on a mass scale. That's something that I would love to accomplish in the next 5 years. Maybe something in person, maybe something in the heart of Vermont. I think we have the perfect place to host conferences. I don't know, you know, it takes a lot of logistics, so probably can't do that by myself, but pulling in some advisors to help with some of those plans and planning. But yeah, I would love to see Vermont be used as a hub for more education, especially when it comes to marketing. We met at a marketing meetup, so we know how many amazing brains are, you know, the PR world, the graphic design world, social media, digital marketing, PPC marketing. There are so many talented people in the state, and I feel like if we can bring more people into it, you know, we can raise the awareness of how amazing the work is that comes out of Vermont. And so I feel like that's another like big project, really big project that I do want to accomplish in the next 5 years as well. Totally. Well, I feel like if you're hosting something, it will be fun. I'm ready to go to another networking event hosted by the Winfield Creative. I love that. And I think it's so important to have vision boards and have goals and just like think about, I don't know. I'm kind of maybe too optimistic in that a goal is ever too big. I think sometimes you have to obviously break down achievable steps. Absolutely. But dream big. Like you might as well, like there's no harm in wanting something big for yourself. Yeah, you never know. And I feel like it also pushes you, and it pushes you to go beyond just the thinking you thought you were capable of. Right. It helps with a lot of critical thinking and problem solving if you are able to kind of say, okay, I need to get to this top of the mountain, but let's just start small. Let's, you know, look at the first step in front of us instead of the whole staircase. And once you look down and look back, you realize how high you were able to climb. And also not being afraid to ask for help. I feel like that was something I've always been a little weary of, especially the first year in entrepreneurship. I was like, oh, I don't want to ask for help. Oh my gosh. I always needed to ask for help, and there's no shame in that.
Yeah. Well, as Miley Cyrus says, it's the climb. So there
Totally.
you go.
Totally.
So another aspect of your business is your own podcast.
Oh, yes.
So talk to us a little bit about that and what your goals are maybe for the podcast specifically within the Winfield Creative.
Yeah. So I started the Marketing Mixtape podcast, available at thewinfieldcreative.com and all major streaming platforms. I came from the radio background. So one of the reasons why I started this Marketing Mixtape podcast was to bring back some of that passion.
Yeah.
I specifically formatted this podcast as a collaborative effort with other creatives. So there was an effort that I started last September. So that was the anniversary of the Winfield Creatives, start and launch. I missed being on the radio. I also had a podcast during lockdown times with my sister. So I missed actually podcasting. And I was brainstorming different ideas of how the Winfield Creative can reach and educate beyond just the borders of Vermont.
Yeah.
While using the power of social media. So one of the things that exists out there is Instagram Lives. And so I was like, isn't there opportunities to pull in industry experts that we can brain share essentially on an Instagram Live? We can teach while we're doing it and then pull that content down once it's done, clip it into a podcast episode, and then reshare it with the world as long form content. And that's exactly what I did. So with this, I decided to reach out to pretty big names. These were people that were based out of Texas, based out of Florida, based out of I can't remember where anybody else. The first episode I did was with Amy, based out of the UK. Okay. So even international borders, we can share between cultures. We can share between, different educational backgrounds and really get an idea of, what would help the people that are listening and what can we talk about that can teach them different skills. And that's where the idea for the Marketing Mixtape came about, is how can we be a little bit more collaborative with the technology that's in front of us with a global reach rather than just a smaller in-person, we're all sitting in a room and then what happens. How can we record it and keep it out there forever? So I think that was a big piece of, bringing back the Marketing Mixtape podcast. And I love doing it.
Yeah. So. Well, kudos to you for reaching out to people that are big names from other places as well.
Yeah, and that was terrifying. Yeah. I thought they would say no, and the people I thought would say no said yes.
Right.
So that's another lesson to learn.
Yeah, you might as well ask. The worst that someone's going to do is say no.
Yeah.
Well, I would love to play another one of your songs.
Yeah.
So let's take a peek. What would you like to play next?
So speaking about, learning from other cultures, I think Flamingo by Kiro Kiro Bonita makes sense. We want to enjoy a little bit of half English, half Korean language, and it's also a really cutesy fun song that I just really enjoy playing while I do dishes. So
okay, all right, I'll get our dishwashing mode on and we'll listen to Flamingo. Here we go. That was Flamingo by Caro Caro Bonito. Yes, I'm hoping I pronounced that correctly. And we're back with Brittany on Abstract. So fun songs about authenticity, washing the dishes, listening to that. I love that. It's your authentic dishwashing moment.
Heck yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about, I would love to dig into more of what you were saying about what makes you kind of authentic in your hobbies, doing burlesque and doing stand-up.
Yeah.
So take us through and tell us a little bit more about that side of you and what you do outside of the Winfield Creative.
Yeah. So what I do for fun is I find a lot of inspiration for the Winfield Creative's content, especially through my hobbies.
Totally.
So I love doing comedy. You can catch me at Vermont Comedy Club at 101 Main. Almost every Saturday, they do a free improv drop-in from 10 to 12.
Cool.
So you can really practice your improv skills and just having a little bit of fun with not being yourself and taking yourself out of your comfort zone in a safe, judge-free environment. I think that's a big piece of it, is being able to be psychologically safe while practicing a brand new hobby is super important. And yeah, so definitely improv has helped with becoming more confident on stage, helping with public speaking, incorporating more creativity into content planning, and also with burlesque too. Like, that was my first ever public performance.
That's so awesome.
Was, in front of 150 people.
Wow.
So yeah, it was kind of wild. And once the show was over and, you had 150 people like hooting, hollering, clapping, like very, very loud. Like, I've never felt that amount of decibels come at me at once. It's a high that you just are continuously chasing now, I feel like. Well, I get why there are adrenaline junkies in the world now. Exactly. I totally get it. I'm one of you now, just in a very different way. I feel like comedy really helps with bringing awareness to the crappier pieces of social media. Like, social media is a controversial topic. I knew that going in. Yeah. But I did need to find a way to talk about it that does not lessen anybody else's experience with it. That is never my goal. And comedy allows me to talk about some of those aspects in a way, in a different viewpoint than saying just, social media sucks. Like, you should hire the Winfield creative to take it off your plate. Like, right. No, that's not why we're doing this. We can still educate through humor and bring some of that lightheartedness into the conversation, so that way people open up, a little bit more and are a little bit more willing to want to learn about social media, because you're addressing the elephant in the room right off the bat. And also, I came from a mental health background as well. So being able to combine both mental health advocacy and comedy into the Winfield Creative's mission, that's really how that's our teaching style. That is what you come to the Winfield Creative for, is, creative education, but also we do get pretty serious and we address the elephants in the room. Right. And that, especially being social media, is addicting. There's science on it. I'm not denying it. But if I can teach through comedy and lessen that burden for somebody else, that's really how my hobby has been able to influence how the Winfield Creative goes about teaching the community members.
Yeah, definitely. Gotcha. So do you find that the type of content that you typically do at like the open mic comedy nights is kind of targeted toward the social media, or do you use like what's kind of like your bit? Like, I know some comedians kind of go for like certain topics that they think are funny or that incorporate their life. So what's kind of your style with the comedy?
Oh yeah. So I've had a few that I've written that are about social media. I'm still trying to like figure out how to make it more relatable to people, but mostly the comedy sets that I've performed have been about dating and relationships. Okay. So yeah, sometimes you also, when you're on stage like that, you just want to put work aside. Yeah. And I feel like that's also a big reason to have hobbies when you're an entrepreneur, is to sometimes put work away. I love content creation, as you can imagine, in the form of photography. I was a photography minor. And sometimes, going on a hike and just keeping my phone literally in the car, taking my digital camera with me so I could still capture content in the form of nature and how beautiful it looks. You can have the separation and still be inspired by your hobbies, but you don't have to be working all the time in order to enjoy your hobbies. Yeah. So I think that's been a big part of, learning about myself, and my best ideas have come from when my phone's not in my hand.
Yeah, there you go. And in terms of like the performing arts, so obviously comedy and burlesque are both kind of similar in that you're performing. Yeah. Did you have like a background in that? Did you do like theater or anything growing up? So it was kind of something that when did you start like realizing that you had a talent for that?
I feel like I've always kind of been that kid. How do I say this? I was always kind of that kid to make really good jokes, just sometimes ill-timed. Yeah. Trying to make light of a situation, but maybe just my brain it didn't come out right, or it did, definitely not the right timing. So once I learned that, got a lot better. But yeah, I feel like I've always been that kid in my family dynamic, being the oldest daughter, you just want to lighten the mood a little bit if things get a little too serious. We're like, guys, it's not that serious. Come on. Like we can come about it a different way. So, I feel like taking from some of those aspects of how I grew up and my family dynamics, it always was it planted a seed in me, but it wasn't until I started actually bartending at Vermont Comedy Club that I was like, oh, I could do this too. That's how I saw the entrepreneur world too, is like, oh, like one day, what if, if I started a business? What if I got up on that stage? Like, until I seriously, heavily involved myself in the community and saw other people doing it and how they were doing it and being like, oh, I could do this too. Right. I could make it my own. Nobody's getting up here and talking about, social media. Nobody, also there was an opportunity that, when I started doing burlesque, it was all of the female coworkers at VCC. So again, talking about psychological safety, like instead of just going and auditioning for, a different burlesque group, it was people I already trusted who had that performing arts background that then they brought us in and being like, okay, here's how you dance. Here's how you wear heels. Cause I was a tomboy who grew up with sneakers, awesome, never wore heels in my life, really. So, just a safe community of women that essentially were like, here, take my hand and we'll get through this together. I still, to this day, the first burlesque show that I did, my friend Chelsea, who was a professional burlesque dancer out in Chicago, she was really the one who said, let's do this, like women of VCC. Totally. Let's go, set up a show and we will put together this amazing show for people. And I remember when we were going out to do our introductions right before the show really started, her and I were backstage and we were about to open the curtains. And we looked at each other and again, goosebump moment. It's just a moment I'll never forget. And I'm like, oh, she's got me. Yep. Yeah. So I feel like moments like that really helped me overcome those nerves and I really didn't feel nervous after that happened. We just went out there, did our thing. And I also put myself in the mindset of you are braver than everybody else in the audience right now. Right. They're not doing what you're doing. And just by showing up for yourself, you're already giving yourself an advantage over, somebody who wouldn't do it at all, which it's totally okay to have that choice. But that helps me overcome public speaking. That helps me overcome comedy sets. That helps me overcome burlesque performances where it's an extremely vulnerable environment. And I've just kind of trained myself, and it's actually become easier to put myself on video or to send a voice message than it is to write an email. Right now, I am so much more comfortable putting myself on camera and recording myself than it is to send try to convey emotions through a text message, Yeah. So it's really become part of me. And of course it's become part of the content creation that comes out of the Winfield Creatives profile. Yeah, totally. So when you first started at Vermont Comedy Club, were you looking for just a bartending gig or and then it just turned into this whole community? Okay. Yeah. So it actually took me 2 years of working there? No, maybe a year and a half before I signed up for my first improv class, which I signed up for the improv class after doing the big burlesque show. So kind of did things backwards. But I saw my coworkers signing up for these classes and starting to do stand up and just becoming more confident in themselves. So, I've consider myself kind of a later adopter of improv, especially. But now, at least I signed up and did it, and
there's no timeline to these things.
Absolutely not.
The fact that you're doing it, like you said, there's so many people that wouldn't even have the courage or know-how yet, at least, to go up and be doing what you're doing. So and I feel seeing other people, that puts a sense of safety in my brain. So
they survived their first stand-up class,
totally.
like, and I heard the stories, and their experiences were, it wasn't actually as scary as I thought it would be. So learning from other people and becoming a little bit more educated to have that safety net psychologically really helped me. But yeah, and also surrounding myself in the community. So that first year and a half of working there, people got to know me. I was a server and bartender. Like, comedians got to know me. They got to know my story. They got to know my name. They got to know the Winfield Creative and my mission outside of the walls of the comedy club, and also were willing to help the business. And I was going through a lot of transitional pieces in my life at that point. A lot of transitional pieces. Like, every aspect of my life was changing. And those people I developed a relationship with and still have a relationship with, they had me. They, like, even if I bombed on stage, they would still clap for me. Right. And I feel like that's important as well, is finding people that have common interests, that want to get to know you, that you feel safe around, and you share those common interests so that way you can grow in them.
Yeah, definitely. And also just being in a familiar environment. Like, I know, like, the physical place, if I've been in there before, I'm like, okay, I can I can chill out in here rather than like somewhere completely new. So I think that makes total sense. And kudos to you for going for it.
Thank you.
But let's play some more of your music. Maybe we'll play 2 in a row, since we're coming down to the last 15 minutes here. So what 2 would you like to play, and take us through why you chose them?
Yeah, so let's do Remember That Night by Group Love, and then Lost in Space by Foster the People. They kind of have the same vibe.
Okay.
So Lost in Space is actually a brand new song by Foster the People, and the moment I heard it, I became obsessed. It's actually a song that reminds me of DJ Taka sets down at Lamp Club, Lamp Shop, and so it's a little bit more celestial, so it kind of is a great song for manifesting too. And then Remember That Night by Group Love, one of my favorite bands to see live. It's all about celebrating memories with the people that you're surrounded by. So making memories with people, being present in the moment, putting your phone away, and just remembering that night so that way it lasts for your life, and you can always remember the feeling and really remember the people that showed love to you when you needed it most.
Totally. I love it. All right. So we'll start out with Remember That Night, and then we'll play Lost in Space. All right. That was Foster the People with Lost in Space. You're listening to Abstract. And now we are coming to the end of the show. Unfortunately, time flies when you're having fun. This
so much.
Always happens whenever I'm on air with people. I get so focused on what people are saying and so enthralled, but that's a good thing. So here at the end, since we only have a couple minutes, do you want to just give everyone once again your pitch? How can we find you? How can we support you and follow you and all that jazz?
So you can find the Winfield Creative on all social platforms, especially on Instagram at the Winfield Creative. I would love it if you would check out my website, thewinfieldcreative.com. I do offer both social media management and mentorship opportunities. So consultations for women-owned business owners who are looking to elevate their marketing, whether that be social media, web design, email marketing, or paid ad strategy. Nothing's off the table. Let's just have a conversation about it. You can book that discovery call at thewinfieldcreative.com.
Nice. She's got it. She's got it down. And as for your podcast, you're on all platforms. Yes. Remind me of the name of your podcast again.
It's the Marketing Mixtape Podcast with the Winfield Creative. So you can find it at thewinfieldcreative.com, or you could find it on all streaming platforms that you are listening to and loving.
So fun. Well, we have to obviously promote the other podcasts in the podcast world here on Abstract. And you have a guest lined up for your podcast. What's upcoming with that?
Yeah, so I'm actually on a podcast, a live Instagram podcast tomorrow.
Oh my gosh.
With Becca D'Ornalis. Sorry, Becca, I'm definitely mispronouncing your name. she is the owner of The Story Artisan. She's a branding and storytelling expert. So we're talking about stories that resonate and how to create those stories that resonate for your marketing. So that is tomorrow, 3 p.m. So June 10th, 3 p.m. on Instagram, either at The Story Artisan or at the Winfield Creative on Instagram. And then that will be available on the Marketing Mixtape podcast after that if you don't catch the live version.
So awesome. You're as booked and busy. I love it. One podcast to another. All right. And last but not least, which I have been so excited since I saw that you chose this song.
Oh my God, yes.
Ultimate from Freaky Friday. Tell us why you chose it. Take us through your music selection.
Because it's a banger.
For real.
But also I feel like it, often my brain dreams in 2000s teen movies.
Yes.
So Freaky Friday was definitely a pivotal piece of my childhood. In this ending scene, after Lindsay Lohan goes through the entire character development plot, it's just that perfect ending song to a 2000s teen drama where, the mom and the daughter have, a really good relationship. And this is just the celebration song to end it with a bang. And it's such like a rockin' song. You're the ultimate. Yeah. Like, why wouldn't you? So I feel like this is a perfect ending song to this podcast episode.
Totally. I love it. I'm excited to hear it. I haven't heard it in so long. Yes. Now it makes me want to watch Freaky Friday, truly. Maybe I'll do that after this.
Heck yeah.
But one thing that I've always loved about Freaky Friday as well is I feel like it's such a great, like, deeper lesson in, like, empathy.
Oh, yeah.
Because they switch roles. And I think that that's, like, something that I'm sure, since we're connecting it to what we're talking about, like, storytelling wise, like, you're literally someone else. So you don't know what their story is until you're literally in their shoes.
Absolutely. And as a social media manager, that's a very important piece, is getting to know your clients so well that you can speak on their behalf and tell their story.
Totally.
In a way that sounds and feels like them and is authentic to their brand and how they approach business, because everybody does it differently, which is what makes you unique as a business owner and why people seek you out in particular. So,
right. Yeah. So got to get that deep meaning in there.
Heck yeah.
Well, Brittany, thank you so much for coming on Abstract. I've had such a good time, and, keep us up to date about all that you're doing. I'm sure we'll see you at the next networking event, right?
You know it.
But as for now, thanks for listening to Abstract, a show dedicated to abstract ideas discussed amidst ever-changing tunes. I'm your host, Abbey B.K, and I hope you have a great day or night.